All right, so I'm back here this morning. It's early August, beautiful day up here in Massachusetts. It's allergy season. I'm going to apologize in advance because I'm a little bit congested. Today's topic is called Overcoming the Fear of Speaking. And I've got a guest with me. His name is Mike Acker. And Mike is coming to us from Seattle, Washington, if I'm not mistaken. And he and I do very similar work. Mike is the founder of Advanced Coaching and Consulting. He's a speaker, he's a podcaster, and he's also the author of 4 books, the most popular of which I believe is called Speak with No Fear. And that was his first book. And today we're going to explore this whole idea of how to get over the fear of speaking, not in general, but speaking in front of audiences and teams and things of that nature. So Mike, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks so much, David. I'm looking forward to diving in and talking about this for you and for your audience.
Absolutely. So you've got a colorful background, and I know that because we talked briefly earlier in the summer, and I've watched a number of your YouTube videos. So before we dive into the whole speaking piece, bring everyone up to speed on why you got into this, how you get into this, that whole experience in Mexico as a kid. I'm really interested in that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it goes back to my childhood where I had a speech impediment and I had to work very diligently. My mom said that I was very intent on overcoming the speech impediment. I couldn't say the sound j. I couldn't differentiate between shoulder and soldier. And I had a difficulty with some other things as well. Mm-hmm. And then working with a speech therapist and then really methodically going to my mom every single day and my dad every single day saying, let's work on it. Let's work on it. I didn't want to have anybody say, I can't hear you. I can't understand. So I very diligently worked on that. And then I was able to overcome that. And from there, I went into pretty much all the normal stuff that a kid does. And I did pretty well. I did the reciting of poetry for those kind of contests. I did spelling bees. And then right when I was getting more comfortable and confident, my dad came home one day and said, I quit my job. We're moving to Mexico. And so there we were 2 months later, and we moved to Mexico to be missionaries, which is quite the difference than from how my parents started, which is a different story. But my parents originally were drug smugglers. So wow. We can circle back to that if you want to later on. But
yeah, that's interesting.
So they went from drug smuggling to serving the poor in the outskirts of Mexico. And there I once again had this tremendous challenge to overcome. Some people are quick at languages, like my dad and my sister. My mom and I were not. And so every single day I would be working on Spanish and I just couldn't get it and I couldn't get it and I couldn't get it. So I had this idea. I said, Dad, what if I do a full immersion? Just put me into a Mexican school and it'll be great. And my buddy had done this. He had gone to a nice private school. He had picked it up fast. My dad, he knew somebody at an inner city school. And so he drops me off at this inner city school and he says, hey, if you don't want to stay, no problem. I'm gonna go talk to the principal. He talks to the principal. He comes out and says, Mike, I'll pick you up at 2:30. And the entire school surrounds me. Like the entire school surrounds me. The teachers, everybody. And literally 1990, no one had seen none of these kids had seen an American culture had not infiltrated Mexico as it has now with the TV and everything.
Right.
And so it was I was this bright, shining star, white, tall, gangly arms and, long blonde hair, blue eyes, huge buck teeth. And kids are coming up to me and touching me and running away. And then I got escorted away to the 5th grade class. I mean, it was awful. It was just embarrassing. And then throughout the next couple of years, I'd get thrust up on stage. And by the 7th grade, I learned how to speak some Spanish, but it was miserable. And so I'd get up in front of the entire class and everybody would just laugh at me. Everybody would laugh at me, even including the teacher. Wow. So they thought I was this like class clown. So then I embraced it, even though it's not who I was. Right. I embraced this identity of class clown, but really hated getting up in front of people because I didn't want to be funny. Yep. They took me as funny.
Yep.
So I went through some traumatic experiences there in Mexico, and then I came back to the United States. Once again, had to reacculturate after 7 years. And then I had my own kind of speaking faux pas in the United States where I said just embarrassing things and just bad until finally through debate and through the methodical work, I was able to get to a spot where I was good. And then I kept on working so I could get better, and I still keep on working.
Yeah. And so it sounds like it's a lifetime of trying to overcome an insecurity, whether it's the speech impediment, or being different in a different country, it's getting comfortable with yourself that's probably allowed you to do what you do today, is how I'm reading this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say probably around 26. And I talk about this in my book, Speak with No Fear. In in this moment when I became a senior pastor when I was 26, 25 years old.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I had to find me. And I had never really tried to find me to that extent.
Yeah.
Like when I was just teaching teenagers and kids as an associate pastor, I I kind of had this idea of what I wanted to be like, but now I was thrust in front of all these educated people, far more educated than I was, just some tremendous people. And here I was having to find myself so that I could get up in front and not just pass out. I mean, I'd get up at 4 o'clock on a Sunday, work on my teaching
Yeah.
for more hours than I had already worked on, go through it a kind of times, then speak it, and then I listened to it, and I would just lay down on my office floor afterwards. I'd be like, "Oh my gosh." I mean, I don't know why everybody's not just leaving. So I went through this whole journey of just who am I
Yeah.
and what do I want to do? And I came up with a life mission during that time. I came up with just some of my core values for myself,
Yeah.
and I came up with more of my own speaker personality.
Yeah, I relate. I don't mean to laugh, but I relate. When
Yeah.
I first got into this whole thing I do right now, the biggest hurdle for me to overcome was to stand up in front of people. And early when I started, I used to ask my wife to take the kids out, get them out of the house, and it might be an entire Sunday of writing what I wanted to say and ripping it up and losing my mind. And I don't know about you, but inevitably I would get up and abandon everything I had written down and just let it rip. It would just start to come out. I'm curious to get your take on that. Were you a slave to what you wrote down, or did it just something else come out when you got up in front of the room? Did you find yourself that way?
Oh man. Well, I did so many crazy things. So I became a senior pastor and I had just traveled down to Mexico and I had heard this incredible teaching and I thought I'm going to teach that, but it was in Spanish. So from my memory, I kind of rewrote the whole thing and it was a long sermon in Spanish, but it like fit.
Yeah.
And so I probably taught for an hour
Yeah.
and it was extremely boring. And then I thought, okay, I don't want to do that again. And so that's when I started questing, and I would listen to a different preacher every week, like religiously. Like I'd listen for hours, and like I would hours and hours. So for a while, every single week, I was becoming a different speaker. So
Yeah.
for 1 month, I became this like really gregarious Rick Warren who pastors, 25,000 down in Saddleback in California,
Yeah.
and then I'd become like TD Jakes, this famous black preacher who is in Dallas. And
Yeah.
so I was actually, it would flip flop. Sometimes I would stay like I'd actually memorize what Rick Warren said, and other times I would. I mean, so it just was. I was all over the place
Right.
until probably about 6 months.
Okay. And then what? So I want to expand on this, but I also want you to kind of talk about why you got into writing, and because there's a lot of work that goes into writing a book. I'm just beginning and I don't know when I'm going to end. So you've already done 4 of these, but there's a reason you wrote Speak No Fear. I don't know what that was, but I'd like you to tell me. And what were you looking to accomplish as you went through that process? Who were you trying to reach?
Right. So I had gotten to this spot, right, with my own speaking where I could speak with no fear and speak with confidence.
Yeah.
And I had done that in front of thousands of people and in all kinds of different settings. So for religious and non-religious. And at the point in time where Speak with No Fear came about, I was ramping up my communication coaching. I'd always done that for my staff, for other people.
Yeah.
But now I had people coming to me from outside of the church world, outside of my own work, outside of my sales stuff, and people started coming to me. And one of those clients was a lady named Rachel Richards,
Mm-hmm.
and she had written a book and just extremely popular. It's got over 1,000 reviews. It's often there with Dave Ramsey's book on financial literacy.
Yeah.
And a college had invited her to come speak, and she was just extremely nervous. So she reached out to me, and then afterwards she said, hey, I'd love to trade services with you instead of paying you. I'm like, well, that doesn't really fly. Like, what can you do? And she's like, I don't know. I mean, like, I wrote a book, and so I started thinking through that whole idea, like, what would I do if I wrote a book? And I knew right away, My number one thing that I went through with people was how to speak with no fear, how to overcome that anxiety and nervousness and sweatiness that
Yep.
came in. It was the number one thing people came to me again and again about. So I called Rachel up and I said, okay, I'm going to write a book.
Mhm.
What if you coach me through the process and
Mhm.
I'll help you overcome your fear of speaking? So we did this and we worked every week for her. Probably one of the clients I've worked more with than anybody. And she got up and she nailed the incredible speech, did fantastic, and it really set her up for success. And she's called me out on some things. And at the same time, she walked me through the process, actually was my content editor for Speak With No Fear. And she said, Mike, this is an important book. The world needs this.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that felt great. And then my audience really was those clients that I kept on working with to overcome their fear, which is typically that professional who's moving up in their career. So it's not a professional who's just like, hey, I'm here, I'm done, I don't need to go anything. It's the professional that's got growth mindset.
Yep.
I want to become an upper level management or VP or director or C-suite. So now literally I have clients, for example, this week I'm flying out to work with Stipe Miocic, and I have permission to talk about our work in sense of I'm helping him get his communication excellent. And he's a 3-time heavyweight championship of the UFC.
Are you going to
So
get in the ring with him or?
yeah, I'm not going to ring with him and die. One punch is going to knock me out. I'd have lots of fear.
Yeah.
Be
Yeah.
in the ring with fear.
Yeah.
Lots of fear. He
That's
would
good. That's
knock me
good.
out like that.
So wait, he wants you to help him do what?
So I'm just helping him communicate. And so now I work with people on that. So he doesn't have the fear part, but I just have these people who are these incredible upper level professionals and athletes and CEOs that I get to work with. But it started really this just helping people out overcome their fear. And I wrote the book and I put it out there. And then I promoted it and worked it and promoted it and worked it. And then at some point in time, it just caught
Yep.
and it just blew up, and the book got on all kinds of best list and such. As you see in the background, that's the Italian version as well, so it's been translated into
Oh yeah.
Italian, and so the publisher just sent me some of the copies as well, and so I thought that was pretty cool.
It's really cool. You talk. I think in that book you talk about identity
Mm-hmm.
and things
Yeah.
like that, and skills and messaging.
Yes.
So to kind of dive into each of these, of those three, maybe talk about what each of those means. But of the three, as you help people with, say, identity, well, I would think that's got to be the biggest thing people have to overcome is who they think they are, or whatever those things are. So can you expand on those three things?
Yeah. Actually, you and I are jumping ahead now. We're jumping into my forthcoming book
Oh,
this
my
fall,
bad.
something on Speak with Confidence. No, because you and I had talked about this. So that's actually my framework of speaking, and
Okay.
I've worked on this with people that I take people through. So really, the identity piece, most of that is found inside of Speak with No Fear. But
Okay.
the idea is this: that you get confident in communication by having speaker identity, speaker messaging, and speaker skills. And those are the three elements that you need to speak with confidence. Often people's fear is rooted in identity. So
Mm-hmm.
confidence is often rooted in overcoming that fear and then gaining messaging and gaining skills. But overcoming that fear goes back to so much of what's inside of Speak With No Fear, things like you be you, and
Mm-hmm.
which is that whole identity piece. And so here's one of the ways I explain this. It's like the front lateral raise. If I grab a weight and I put it in my arm and then hold it in front of me at arm's length, then what happens? Even if it's just 10 pounds, it begins to shake.
Yeah.
But if I take that 10-pound weight and bring it all the way to me,
Mm-hmm.
what happens? I'm fine. I mean, I could hold 10 pounds to my chest all day long.
Yeah.
And parents do it all the time with little kids,
Yeah.
little babies, right? And so to the chest, no problem. Closer to you, the better. So when you get in front of people, you actually have two weights. You have the weight of message. If I don't know something that's far away from me,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to get really nerve-wracking. But if I
Mm-hmm.
know it really well, like ask me about my family, I can tell you all day long. Ask me about nuclear fission, I have no idea. It's going to
Mm-hmm.
shake like crazy.
Right.
And I'm not going to even be able to go for it because I have no idea.
Right.
The more confident you are about knowing the content, the better you're going to be. Well, the messaging, it makes sense. The identity is a sense of the more true to me that I'm really being, the more I'm going to not be nervous.
Mm-hmm.
The less true to myself that I'm being, the more nerve-wracking it is going to be.
Yeah.
So if I am trying to be someone else, or I'm trying to be like that calm, cool, and collected person,
Yeah.
and I'm not. For example, I had a client. She came to me and said, I want to be calm, cool, and collected. And I said, well, what are you like? And she said, well, I'm, outgoing, gregarious, but everybody at work, well, they're so good at communicating and they're calm, cool, and collected. So I need to be calm, cool, and collected. And I said, you're going to be miserable trying to be something that's not true to
Yeah.
you.
Yep. Yep.
And the
Yep.
more true to you, now at the same time, you want to improve it, right? So you don't just go like, it's just who I am, and I get lost in my thoughts. No, you can
Right.
improve that.
Right.
So you
Right.
want to accept and improve. Yeah, go for it.
Now, so on the identity part though, like at one point in your life, obviously with say speech issues or with being say a different person in a different country that clearly doesn't look like anybody else,
Yeah.
it probably would have been more difficult for you to go, no, just get up there, Mike. Just get up there, because you're not good with yourself yet, or you're worried about what other people think. So you spent a lifetime working on this. I work with a number of professionals as well. We probably do very similar things. Some of them are really good at getting out there, maybe to a fault where they don't shut up. And I'm guilty of not shutting up, by the way. And they become the star of the show, but maybe they're not connecting with the audience. And there's others that would rather, even at executive level, they would rather be in the shadows and behind the scenes, and they need to get up and speak, and they're just reluctant leaders. What's your experience working with those different personalities? Maybe somebody that needs to rein in it a little bit, and then somebody else that needs to take a chance. You ever have to encounter that?
Yeah. So I think one of the reasons that people don't have any fear at all is arrogance. And so that person who's just getting up in front of there thinks that their words are gold and that everybody should just listen to them. And that person really needs to listen to themselves and get some trusted feedback from other people to go, wow, maybe I am not golden in everything I need to say. And maybe I do need a little bit of fear, just a little bit of nervousness, because it's gone. And often with those people, you have to help them understand that what they're saying is not always as good as what they think they're saying.
Yep.
On the other side, the person on the background, I mean, often those people are coming to me like, Mike, I need to get my words out. I need to speak up. I need to be in that. I don't want to be just disappearing into the background. And I'll challenge them to be courageous, to find ways to speak up, and we'll actually work on their ability to interject. One of the things I've done with some clients is I've gone into speaking, and then I'll tell them, you have to interrupt me. So I'll be talking, and then I'll say, okay, at any point in time, you just jump in. I'll just start waving my hand like this right here, and they'll have to come in and cut me off and take over.
Yeah.
And we'll just work on the skill of interrupting.
I like that. And it gives them a voice. It gives them permission to now insert themselves. So go back to the part where people, I remember when I first get into management, for example, or I remember when I first got married and came to the office with a wedding ring on, I felt like there was a spotlight on me, almost like I was a different human being that just arrived. I've got this decoration on my hand. And then the same thing happened when I became a manager. All of a sudden I've got this title following me around in my head. And I'm like, how am I supposed to be now? Do I look different? And it was this weird feeling that I had to now somehow come across in a different way. Like, I'm not a manager. I shouldn't be anybody's boss. I shouldn't. Remember when we first had kids? I'm like, I'm somebody's father. Are you kidding me? Like me? So do you
taking that baby home from the hospital? You sure I can do this?
That's the whole thing. I mean, we were just talking about, we've got 3 kids, and even when my daughter's younger than my boys are 4 and 5 years older than her. So when she first came home, I'm like, I don't know how to take care of a little girl. I don't know what to do with this. Like, I don't belong doing this. So, but I had those same feelings when I would have to get up and speak early in my career. And I would think everybody you deal with has to go through that idea that I do belong up there. People want me up there. And what I'm interested in hearing about is, and I think your whole life has been based on this, is overcoming or dealing with your vulnerabilities. And I think that's what makes the speaker endearing, is not being the expert, or being willing to be vulnerable without being a fool. I mean, you don't want to get up there and just like fall apart, but at the same time, don't pretend. And
Right.
and so any thoughts on that?
Yeah. You connect with people in your weaknesses, you impact people in your strengths. And so often what we do, we want to just go for the impact. And so look how awesome I am. Look how good I am. Here's my talents. Here's my abilities. Let me wow you. And people go, wow. But you connect with your weakness. And so this is why if you listen to any fantastic speaker, there's always going to be a point in time where they're going to bring up their own weakness in this,
Mhm.
because it's that moment in time where you go, man, I felt connected with that person.
Mhm.
One of the coolest things that's happened for my book is people reaching out to me literally from around the world, and they'll say, I felt like you were talking to me.
Yep.
I've had people fly out to meet with me or fly me out to meet with them. And as a result of the book, I'm just going, man, I felt I you got me.
Yep.
You understood me. And so part of that though is because I talk about my own weaknesses in it. I talk about still, I'm not the greatest speaker. One person on the Audible, they left this review, David, and it said, horrible book. It's got 112 ratings. Most of them are good, but horrible book, no good content. If this guy can be considered a great speaker, then I guess the only good message is anybody can.
Well, that's flattering.
Yeah, and there's some other great comments, and overall, it's got positive ratings, and so is the case on Amazon. But I thought, well, you know what? I'll take it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll take it
Well, there's
because I'm not
seven.
trying to wow them.
No, well, there's 7 billion people in this world that share 7 billion's opinions about everything, right?
Right.
And these are conversations I've had with my kids over the years. I'm like, you cannot be everything to everyone. There are going to be people out there that just don't like what you do. They might not like who you are. So this comes back to me. It's your identity is really what matters. Are you good with it?
Yeah.
Because what comes
Are you
back
good
at,
with it? And do you have people who you belong to?
yeah,
And they're good with it. And I think that's really the huge thing. So I did a little thing on the imposter syndrome,
yeah,
and really it's finding your value. Where's your value coming from? And ultimately, the first one is that support network of who do you belong to right now? Who claims you as a friend or as a family member, and who's proud of you? Who's in your corner? So even though I went through these tumultuous times, including getting beaten up as a kid, even though I went through those experiences, I had this network around me that accepted me, improved me. And so part of my identity comes from that close network. And as always, our kids at first, they don't have their own values. They value what the family values until they create their own values over the course of time. So I have this support network, these people that have me, that own me in a good way. And then I've, yes, really grabbed a hold of what am I about? What's my mission in life? What do I do? What are my values? What do I hold on to? What is my purpose? What do I want to leave behind?
yeah,
And that gets me to a spot where at the end of the day, it's not about wowing. It's not about pressing. It's about not even about making money. The
right,
ultimate deal is I start my day with simple prayer saying, God, help me help people.
yeah,
And whether that's an athlete, whether that's in starting entrepreneur or whatever that person might be, let me help that person. Even if it's a paid coaching or large workshop, podcast, writing a book, or doing the behind the scenes so I can do all the other stuff. How do I help people?
how important is your commitment to developing, you talk about skills,
Mhm.
how important is that as it relates to you delivering a message that you believe in, again, to
Mhm.
overcome whatever fear or anxiety might exist as it relates to speaking in general? Talk about those two things and how much they matter and why they matter.
Yeah. So your skills are so important when it means about speaking with confidence, which is part of that overcoming with fear, in the sense that if if you're better at doing something, you feel better at doing it. So if I go out into a football field and everybody says, "Let's play some flag football," and Mike, here's the ball, you be the quarterback. My heart's going to skip a beat because I haven't thrown a lot of footballs. I mean, I could play around a little bit, but I don't really know any plays. I like watching the Seahawks. That's about the extent of my football right there.
Okay.
I didn't grow up in America, but if you put me on the soccer field and say, hey, Mike, why don't you take forward position or midfield or defender, and even goalie to some extent. Hey, I know how to do that. I know how to get down. I know how to position myself. I know how to get open. I know how to, I know how to kick. I've done that. I grew up in Mexico playing soccer.
Mhm.
So I could do that even with some younger people or people who are more skilled. So because I have skills, it gives me confidence. So the greater skills that you have going on stage, the greater confidence you have. See, some
Mhm.
people have no identity issue. I work with several people like, look, I have no identity issue. I believe in myself. I can stand up in front of people and say anything
Mhm.
without insecurity, but I have no idea how to say it.
Okay.
So they're saying this, yeah, and they're all over the place with uhs and fillers, and
Yep.
they're just not skilled getting up in front of people. They
Right.
don't know how to use intonation. They don't know the right diction. They don't know how to breathe right. They don't know how to emphasize. They don't know how to not lose people's attention on Zoom or on stage. So
Right.
they're unskilled. You teach these people skills, and they master skills, and they go, oh, okay. Now
How
I speak with confidence.
how often do you run up against people that dismiss what you do as, oh, it's kind of like just soft, fluffy stuff, or does that ever happen?
I mean, I really don't hear from those people because the cool thing when I work with somebody, and often these free consultations, and in the free consultation, I'll do even some coaching. I'll say, hey, here's what I see.
Yeah.
And people go, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And so again and again, I mean, I've landed clients by telling them what they do wrong.
Yeah.
So I've sat in a CEO. Actually, I had a CEO who was vetting me for his one of his team members who wanted to work with me, one of his managers.
Yeah.
And so the manager says, this guy, Mike, I said, well, hey, just put me on the call with the CEO. And actually, I have done this with multiple CEOs now. And I'll get on the call with CEO. This guy is great, fantastic communicator, so good. And so we're talking, and I said, okay, here's what you do well. This is why you're so successful. And he goes, oh, I never thought about that. It was like a reason why I was successful.
Mhm.
And then I said, and here's something that you do. And he goes, oh. And and then he says, so what else do you do? So he
Interesting.
said yes on working with his program manager, but then he ended up hiring me to come in and speak to the entire organization, and then have a lot of follow-up hours with people. And that's from that person going, yeah, this is not worth it at first. I'm going to
Yeah.
vet this,
Yep.
and then boom. I had another one. This is a really funny one. I was talking with a gentleman, and some of his team members wanted him to work with me. And so he was like, runs this global company, fantastic guy, runs this global company. And so I get onto the call, and you could tell the skeptics. He's like, well, so what am I doing this for?
Yep.
And then we were able just to say a couple of things, and he goes, all right, let's hire him. Let's do it. And so
Right.
sometimes it's just, you got to show that it's if it is soft, it's a
Yeah.
soft skill with a hard edge value.
Yep. Yeah. Well, see, I don't think it's soft. I struggle with anybody that lumps. I've heard that for years. Even when I went through college, taking
Yeah.
communication classes, they were still called soft skills. But all the work I do right now is helping people with these soft skills that they're not
Yeah.
mastering, or that they've yet to master, and that's really what's held them back. You talk a little bit about anxiety and insecurity and things like that. What's your take on your ability to kind of own this stuff you're talking about? How does that help with anxiety and insecurity?
Yeah. Sometimes anxiety is, there's chemical stuff going on, obviously, and I'm not qualified to talk about that type of anxiety.
Mhm.
So much anxiety is just where there's this dissonance between how we feel and how we think we should feel, or
Yeah.
who we think we are and how we think people perceive us. So ultimately, identity as a speaker, the way that I define this is how we perceive people perceiving us.
Hmm.
So I think I'm going to go there, and I think I'm going to come across as someone who knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Good identity, right?
Yeah.
I And so there's this, how people perceive us is part of that. And people will go up there like, well, they won't perceive me here. So I got to shift over to this type of personality, and I got to shift over to this. I want to be perceived as this.
Mm-hmm.
And really when I'm working with people is, let's find you. Let's find what you really think. Let's not try to make you someone else. Let's help you accept who you are, appreciate who you are, and also improve who you are.
Right. Right. So, as a younger person, and I may have said this before on one of my episodes, but I was always most concerned, especially as a kid, about being interesting. How do I walk into a room full of like other kids, for example, that I might not even know, and how do I maintain their interest? How do I tell a story that they're actually going to want to listen to? And I was always worried about what I was going to say, and I realized over time that it had nothing to do with that, And
Yeah.
you talk about, the audience, something to the effect, and I totally agree with this. The audience needs to see themselves in your story. It's really, if you're really, really good, you don't have to talk at all or a lot in order for them to see themselves in what you're saying, whether it's a quick, piece on vulnerability or a really good question. And that's probably what got that CEO to say, let's hire this guy, because you probably said something that he saw in himself that he wasn't, vocalizing yet, I'm thinking.
Yeah, it's a very interesting, like, two thoughts on that. I mean, storytelling is powerful, and the storytelling is not about us being, any classic archetype like the hero's journey is going to be something where people can identify with it.
Yeah.
Very rare is the story where you just go, this person's amazing. They've always been amazing. They've never had difficulty. Aren't they awesome? Those stories don't sell because you don't want to do that. And yet on the other side of that, the other part that I want to bring up was the whole idea of it's not about you. One of the strategies in my book, Speak With No Fear, is how to learn to say it's not about you.
Yeah.
When I was in ninth grade-ish, we would go to these dances, my buddy and I, and all the guys would stand on one side of the room and all the girls would stand on another. They all wanted to be with each other, but they all were so insecure. And everybody's thinking, what do people think about me? What do people think about me? What do people think about me? Do they like what I'm wearing? Do they like how I come across? Do they like my humor? Same thing as you, right? I want people to like me.
Yeah.
Well, my buddy and I somehow realized that no one's thinking about us because they're too busy thinking about themselves. True. So if we go over to the girls and make them feel good, they would love us. So we went and we just like, oh, you look amazing. You want to dance? And we would make them feel good and look good. And so we got to dance with all these beautiful girls. And I realized that at some point in time early on, and this has helped me in my speaking, is when you get up in front of people, like right now, nobody really cares. Whoever's listening, nobody really cares about how my day's gone. Now, the moment I say that, you go, yeah, I do. Well, now that I bring it up, you do.
Yeah, that's right.
But you didn't start going, man, I'm going to tune into Dave's podcast today, and I'm just going to be there to support Mike Acker. And I just want him to know I'm behind him, and I want him to know. When you're listening to a podcast, you're not thinking about how the podcaster is going. You're thinking, I hope this helps me.
Yep.
I hope I learn something. I hope I get entertained. I hope I get insight. I hope I get inspired. Yep. You don't ever go to an event thinking, I'm going to go there. I mean, unless you're a parent, right? You don't ever go there and go, I'm just going to support Les Brown as a public speaker, or I'm going to no, you go there because you want something. And if the speaker gets into the mindset of saying, who cares what people think about how I look or how I sound, as long as I can improve enough to get my point across and help them.
Yep.
Man, I mean, salespeople would make so much more money if they thought, instead of themselves, thought, how do I help people? And bosses and leaders and managers, they would be so much more effective if they would just say, today I'm helping people, I'm educating, I'm inspiring, I'm updating, I'm whatever it is, and we connect it with people. So it's not about you. It's not about me in this moment. And one of the reasons why I can communicate and be more effective in times like right now is that I'm going, how do I help people? And how do I help Dave? How do I help you and your audience? And that makes me more effective.
Yeah. And I think it just comes down to being real, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. That's one of the things that I've struggled with over the years is watching, say, an ineffective speaker not not perform well in front of the group because they're either nervous, they're worried about sounding smart, or they're talking above people. You know, they want to let people know what they know, and there's that
Right.
huge missed opportunity to make the impact because maybe they're not talking to somebody like you in advance. You know, there's a
Right.
lot of power in standing up in front of people, or even doing a podcast like this. There's a lot of power in it, and you don't want to abuse it, and you don't want to
Right.
waste that opportunity. There are people out there, they're looking for answers. And you know, that's my hope, is that maybe we said one thing that causes somebody to take a chance or try something that they otherwise wouldn't have tried.
Right.
So tell me, what have I not asked you? What do you want people to know that maybe you know, somebody that doesn't know you now? It's like, you know what? If you listen to this, I hope you got this out of it. What are some of those things?
Yeah. Where you are is not where you have to stay. So if you are checking this out and going, man, I am a nervous speaker, or, I just don't think that's me, or, I kind of reached the limits of my whatever. Where you are is not where you have to stay. Even going back to the whole story of my mom and dad being drug smugglers, I do this whole inspirational talk where I talk about the choices that they make. And the choices that you make you. And you can make choices right now, wherever you're at. If you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling behind, maybe you're feeling whatever, and just know this, that you can make choices that will take you from where you are to where you want to be. That where you are is not where you have to stay. I've seen this in my own life. I've seen this in my parents. I've seen this in all kinds of different areas.
All right, so I now I got to ask you another question, because you did say maybe we could talk about it later. So you brought up the drug smuggling piece. What I think is so interesting about that is, I mean, that's obviously not a great lifestyle, right? So here you are in a family, and this is what your parents are doing. What caused them to have an awakening or stop doing that and then pivot and go down the missionary path? I mean, it's two separate and opposite identities. And then now all of a sudden they've got to almost like retrain their brains to help. They must have had to overcome some sort of imposter syndrome. And I'm sure as a kid, you were watching that through some lens, trying to figure out what the heck's going on here.
Right. Yeah, so I think for them, I mean, the major thing that this is like this huge topic, right? So the major thing for them that I saw in them was they, when I was 4 years old, they had this major connection, realization that life wasn't about themselves and that they needed something bigger. And that's what we talked to really even about speaking, that
Mhm.
you gotta have a purpose, you have to have a reason. And so they went from living life for themselves and really doing this, and then they had this radical encounter with God, and they went from total anti-Christian to saying, we're going to embrace it, and we're going to become Christians that don't just go to church, don't do the political thing, but Christians who are going to fully embrace the message and go serve the poor and serve the needy. And so that was what I really saw in my parents. And so
Mhm.
they made this entire shift, and they made this thing where instead of doing our own thing for us, we're going to do this for others.
Mhm.
And that was the major shift. And so I got to see that. And then they had to find new ways of employment and such. And they'd
Yep.
actually already shifted out of drug smuggling at that point in time. So that, of course, made a huge impact on me. So when we live for others, it doesn't just impact us, it actually impacts the legacy that we leave.
Yep, yep. You ever have people resist that? You know, going into this missionary background, or you're a pastor for a long time as well. Do you ever have people that are just reluctant to embrace the advice or the suggestion, where they feel judged by maybe somebody who has their life somewhat on track?
I mean, I'm sure I do. Sometimes I don't know the internal motivations. I think at one point in time, I had a person come up to me when I was it seemingly like everything was on track. And I mean, there's always stuff going on, right? So even if our life is on track, there's always areas that we are like not content with.
Yep.
And and he was basically saying to the extent of like that, like, man, I just, you know, didn't feel comfortable. So what I tell people again and again is this, and this is and true in all areas of life, and public speaking is part of it. Compare and compete, you'll live in defeat. So if you're always looking at others and what they're doing well,
Yeah.
If you're comparing yourself, if you're competing against them, trying to do what they're doing, then you'll live in defeat.
Yeah.
And that ultimately what we need to do is live our life to the best of our ability and to accept it, and to really, when we accept it and we appreciate where we're at and we're improving where we're at, then we're able to celebrate with people.
Yeah.
Like I was able to go and see some friends who have just done fantastic. And we started off at the same spot.
Yeah.
In fact, when we started off, maybe I was a little bit further ahead in some areas.
Yeah.
And they've just gone on to just build this empire of wealth and empire of all kinds of stuff. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
And if I'm trying to compare and compete with my friend, then I'm going to look at that and go, I can't even be around you because it makes me feel less about myself. But
Right.
because I do accept it, I do appreciate it, I do improve where I'm at, I can look at him, just go. And I said this, I said, man, I'm so proud of you. This is awesome, man.
Yeah.
I'm just so happy that you are doing so extremely well.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's funny you bring this up because the comparing and competing is relatively common out there. And in my experience, it's around the stuff that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah.
around the house or the money or the title. I look at it and I say, you know, like how do other people receive you?
Yeah.
You know, that's all I'm ever wondering with people. It's like, when you're around, are people better off because of you? You know, that's really what we need to be competing against. Are we making a difference? Our bank account and our resume and all that crap. I mean, it's important. I don't want to diminish it, but it's not. It's the wrong place to compete, and I find that that's where the majority of people get trapped.
Yep.
And then they miss the opportunity to actually make a difference because they're so busy building their damn resume.
Right.
You see the same thing?
Yeah. No, I do. That people are often trying to go after something that they're not even sure what they're going after.
Right.
They're going after people's approval versus just going after themselves. I think there's a passage in the Bible that says godliness with contentment is of great gain.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that whole idea of contentment is just great gain. One of the wisest people ever was talking about, all you can really do is eat, drink, and be merry. Not in the sense of like just gluttony or drunkenness, but in the sense of just, hey, enjoy the life that you have. It's the life you have.
Right.
And yeah, if you're fortunate, and in America we're so fortunate, let's make sure that we're finding ways to give back to others, because we'll find a lot of joy in that. But at the same time, even if we have a lot, we shouldn't be going around and be just apologetic for it. Well, you know, the reason why I have this is, just, if you got a lot, be grateful for it and give back. If you don't have a lot, be grateful for what you have and give back. I mean, we see this, and again, people go down to Mexico, and I just love Mexico. I grew to be more Mexican than I was American by the time I left. Mm-hmm. And you'll see people who have less in some of the poorer areas, and yet they're just so happy. And I'll bring Americans down, we'll build a house or something, and people will say, you know, it's just amazing. They have so much more than me, and they're so much more happier than I am.
Yeah, I've seen that. You know, we went to Kenya on our honeymoon, and I felt that same way. Almost so humbled to be around people who really, they had no financial wealth and no material wealth, but total contentment, like in their heart, you know, and peace in their mind. And it was just, it's unbelievable to experience that, and how happy they are in their lives just to be with other people. And you probably saw the same thing in Mexico.
Absolutely.
So I want to give you the last word on best place to find your book, any message you want people to hear, you know, ways to reach you. I'll let you finish this out.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look up Mike Acker, you'll find me all over the place. So mikeacker.com, you'll find me on Amazon. You'll find my books easily there. I released a 5th book, Connect Through Emotional Intelligence. So I have 5 books and 2 workbooks right now. We'd love for you to connect and reach out to me. mikeacker.com is a place where you can schedule a meeting or check out my resources or have me come to a workshop or whatever might work for you. So thank you so much, Dave. Really appreciate for you having me on your show, and just a chance to dialogue about these areas that may seem soft, but have hard edge value.
Totally agree. Thank you for being here, Mike. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Okay.